Hello, thank you for joining us today for our NVMe Virtual Plugfest number 13 webinar. Today's webinar will be presented by Tim Sheehan, and I'm Kerry Munson. If at all during the presentation you have any questions, please enter them into the questions at the Q&A box, and we will address these at the end. The UNH Interoperability Laboratory has been working with the NVMe.org since 2012. Over the last 8 years, we've performed 13 Plugfests, one of which did take place in Taiwan back in 2018. That was a second 9.0 Plugfest. This Plugfest number 13 will actually be our first virtual event. So a little bit more about the IOL. The IOL consists of 100 undergrad and graduate students as well as 20 full-time staff members. The data center group is myself, Tim Sheehan, and David Wolf. And we have about 17 students that work with us. And the students run all the testing and development for the team. Unfortunately, this event, the students will not be able to participate with us, but more on that in a little bit. So as I said, Plugfest number 13 will be a virtual event. And what that means is the testing will solely be performed by IOL staff. In past events, we have welcomed engineers and attendees to come to our facility and attend the testing, be there with their product, help troubleshoot, and at the end of the event, they know their results. Unfortunately, because of everything going on right now, we are not able to allow attendees to come to our facility, but we do want to continue to do testing for the 13.0 test plan. So this event will be qualifying products for the 13.0 integrators. The week of June 8th will be for NVMe over fabrics, and the following week will be for NVMe SSDs. Here's a look at our agenda. I'll begin by talking about the integrators list, followed by the IOL-INTERACT information, then logistics specifically related to this virtual Plugfest. And then I'm going to turn it over to Tim Sheehan, and he's going to talk about the test plan updates. And then he will give it back to me, and I will close out the presentation. So as of today, there are little over 230 products on the NVMe integrators list. And these products have been added over the last 7-8 years by both Plugfest and weekly reservations. And then the NVMe-oF integrators list was launched a few years ago, and those 80 products have also been added through both Plugfest and weekly reservations. I'll talk a little bit more about weekly reservations later on. All right. So NVMe integrators list products. The NVMe integrators list will include NVMe drives, host platforms, and switches. This integrators list has been combined with the NVMe-MI integrators list. So if you do go on to the list right now, you will see that there are additional columns, and there is a column that will say if a drive has gone through the NVMe-MI testing and what version of the MI spec that it adheres to. And then the NVMe-oF integrators list will accept Rocky, TCP, and FC products. And those include initiators, targets, and switches. Requirements. So this is for the NVMe SSD integrators list or PCI integrators list. So we'll run 2 rounds of conformance testing for PC edition and then LaCroix edition. And then we will also run interoperability testing on 6 platforms, but you have to pass with 5. If you are submitting a U.2 form factor, we will also do hot plug testing. And then there are 2 boot system tests that will be run as well. And just to clarify, the 5 of the 6 host platforms, those are I/O tests. Requirements for host platforms and PCIe switches, those have to be tested with 5 different SSDs and pass. And then the NVMe-MI SSDs will be run with the Teledyne LaCroix test tool. So if you have any questions about what is needed for a product to qualify for the integrators list, please feel free to contact me and I can help you out further. NVMe-oF integrators list requirements. The initiators, hosts, and switches need to run interop testing with 2 NVMe-oF subsystems. The targets, however, will have to run Interop as well with the 2 host systems, and then additional conformance testing. 2 runs of this. The first is the NVMe protocol conformance test, and the second is the NVMe-oF protocol conformance test. These are different, and Tim will explain the difference later on, but please keep this in mind that they are separate. I listed here the information that we would need for both our test reports and to list a product on the different integrators list. Getting this information as soon as possible will help us issue the reports quicker and list products on the integrators list sooner. When you are submitting your products, just feel free to provide this list here. When I reach out to you, letting you know, hey, your product passed and it can go on the integrators list, I'll just follow up with this information to make sure that this is the information that you would like listed. All right, IOL-INTERACT information. So these are the steps that need to be done in order to get access to the IOL-INTERACT test tool. First of all, you need to be a member. There's 2 separate memberships, one for NVMe, and the other is for NVMe over Fabrics. There is a licensing agreement that also needs to be submitted before we can provide the test tool. So once the membership is active, I will provide you the licensing agreement. Once that comes back signed, I will add you to our box file share. If your company does not allow box access, I can add the software to the My IOL website for download, but I can work with you on how to access that later. There's also a license that I will provide you outside of box. This is provided through email as soon as the licensing agreement is submitted. And then Once you do have access to the box files, there is an installation document, which gives you the step-by-step run through on how to install the test tool. There has been changes between 12 and 13 to the installation. Tim will talk a little bit more about this later. And then there's also a demo version available. If you do not have a membership but are interested in trying out the test tool, feel free to contact me and I will set you up with a 30-day demo. All right. Support issue tracking. If you do run across a bug or an issue, you can go on to the My IOL website and submit it through our web portal, or you can contact us directly. However, the web portal will give you an issue number right off the bat, and with that number, you can follow back with us or check the release notes to check the status of your issue. We do use agile processes, so our sprints are approximately 4 weeks, and at the end of our sprints, we do have a minor release. We do think about 4 minor releases in between our major releases, and major releases are twice a year. And again, with the 2 major releases, they coincide with the NVMe.org's test plan releases. So right now, I have mentioned this is NVMe Plugfest number 13, which will be testing test plan number 13, and the IOL-INTERACT version is 13. It's easy to remember, easy to keep track of, but in the fall, we will be releasing IOL-INTERACT 14 to go with test plan 14 for Plugfest number 14. Moving along, we've included several of the changes that have happened with the 13 release. I won't go through each of them, but it is important to note that there are several changes if you are used to testing with the test tool in the past. Ubuntu has been updated. We have been using 16.04 for a while. Currently, that's updated to 18.04. New applications are also written in Python. And the NVMe CLI version 1.10.1 will be the version that you'll need to use. There was also a Java issue. And it's just a matter of changing the rev back to 11.0.6. But if you have any questions on that, just contact us, let us know. But this back rev has solved that minor issue. It's also good to note that test plan 13 will be compliant to NVMe.org's 1.4 spec. So that is new. Moving on to Virtual Plugfest number 13 logistics. So what to ship? Please ship 2 samples of each product. If you have multiple products, 2 of those. And then we want to be sure that the shipment is here 1 week before the event. If you are submitting products for the NVMe-oF Plugfest, we ask that they arrive by June 1st. That way we have a week to make sure everything is set up. We have everything we need to run the product, And if we need to contact you and get something else shipped over, there's time before the event does begin. A major point that I want to note here is please provide the essential cabling and transceivers needed to connect your product. Because we won't be having people come to the events, a lot of our support partners will not be providing extra cables or equipment that we've used in past events. So just anything that you need to run your product, pack it up. Provide a packing slip with everything that you've provided so that when we are shipping it back to you, we can just go down like a checklist to make sure that everything is being returned to you as it should. And not just cables and transceivers and physical objects, but also passwords and any information needed to get in and configure your device to get it working. We ask that your solution is installed on a host system when shipped to the event. Ideally, once it does arrive, we would like to be able to plug it in and have it be able to begin testing as soon as possible. We're not going to be doing a large build at this event for the NVMe over fabrics, only because it is a virtual event. We won't be having the attendees there to assist us, and our staff will also be limited. So just to note, in the past, we've done proof of concepts for iWarp. Before that, way before that was TCP. Unfortunately, we cannot do that this time around. The event will probably last longer than 1 week, and that's just due to limited staffing for this event. If there are any delays with the testing, we will resolve those via email. We'll set up a Zoom call and take the time zones into consideration. We'll be providing a rough schedule after the registration closes so that people know what day their product is scheduled to be testing and know to be available just in case we need assistance with running your device. We'll also provide internet access to your product if needed so that you can work on it remotely. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Tim Sheehan.
Great, thanks, Kerry. Hi, everybody. This is Tim Sheehan, manager in the data center industry here at the IOL. I hope this call finds everybody healthy and well. I guess what I'd like to do as part of this webinar is to go over some of the Test Plan 13 updates that have been happening. Test Plan 13 has been out for easily 6 months now, and we've been working the Interact tool towards this test plan support. As Kerry mentioned earlier, the test plan, the actual Interact NVMe tool that the IOL develops and is provided to you via membership in our NVMe group or NVMe-oF group, as well as the Plugfest, are all versioned the same way. So we're now in Plugfest 13. We're using Interact software 13.0, which is a major rev. And we're also using Test Plan 13. So it makes it pretty easy to follow. Interact 13 is the major version of our software, and minor versions, as Kerry said, they'll be in between the two major versions that come out every year that are coincide with the test plans as well as the Plugfest. The minor versions will come out in between those two major versions, and there's be somewhere between 2 to 4 minor versions that come out, and these will include bug fixes and some potentially new features and things like this. This particular screen that you're looking at right now, this slide shows you the different test plans that are out there that are come from the NVMe.org, and which ones of those test plans actually are associated with which kind of products. The products are over on the right-hand side. The test plans are on the left. The top products are for PCIe SSDs or even MI SSDs, and then the bottom devices are your Fabric or NVMe-oF subsystems and hosts. And you can see that your base specification, which is the middle test plan, adheres to both types of products. Your MI and your Interop today and your NVMe Interop, I should say, are for the actual PCI events, and then your OF Interop is for your Fabrics events. And there is also, besides the base specification, which does include some over Fabrics testing, there is now an NVMe-oF specification 13, and that's been around for a couple of major revs now. Everybody should be aware of that. Although it is a little confusing to have OF tests in both the base specification as well as the OF specifications. So let's jump into PCI conformance testing. Right now, you're going to use the IOL-INTERACT tool version 13 to do your base specification testing, and you'll be also using the IOL-INTERACT Laboratory Edition scripts also to do base specifications. These will both be going and be testing PCI devices. And again, this will be the second Plugfest week that Kerry mentioned earlier. We'll be doing the Fabrics Plugfest week, the first week on the 8th. So that's what you'll be using. Interact, both sets of them, the PC-Edition, which is the Interact tool, and then the Interact Laboratory Edition in order to perform all the conformance testing. Now, there are quite a few changes in the base specification for NVMe conformance. As you can see, there's 101 of them. These are changes to tests. These are in terms of the actual procedure steps or maybe the results that are being seen. These can be changing a lot of times between FYI to a mandatory test, because what happens is when we do a Plugfest or we do a set of testing, the NVMe.org's ICC committee gets together and collates all of the results that we give them to determine if tests are ready or if the industry is ready to actually have those tests move from an FYI status to a mandatory status. So that's definitely a big thing that you should be looking out in the actual test plans, is to make sure that that you're aware of what's changing to mandatory versus an FYI, because it does change every 6 months with each one of the major test plan revs. It could be anything from, as we said, the modifications to procedures and objectives or results to the status of it being mandatory or FYI. And the third one, of course, is new tests. Now, the test plan 13 is a 1.4 compliant test plan, as well as the Interact software version 13 is also 1.4 compliant to the 1.4 NVMe.org 1.4 specification. And as you can expect, there are a lot of new tests. So, talking about the baseline conformance and Interop right now, the conformance, as you can see, there are 46 new tests, and they are in different areas, such as the 5 big ones that I've listed here are the ones that have probably the bigger number. Like telemetry has 6 new tests that are added in there. A lot of them are get log pages, host initiated or controller initiated, and checking things like valid or invalid offsets. Outside of the 512 multiple that your telemetry structure requires. And so 6 new tests in that area. Virtualization's another area, and this would be, I think there's only around 3 new tests in the virtualization, but being able to handle the primary controller and being valid and invalid. So they're mainly or mostly we're checking out the validity of the actual virtualization commands, but then we also check a couple of error conditions in there, and that helps you to manage your resources better. Going down the list, you've got the create, delete, IO, submission queue commands, and I think there's about 3 new tests here. We had one of the tests, 147, was broken out into 2 separate tests because it was determined through testing at the last Plugfest that this test is really a couple of tests combined, so that was broken out. And then there's a new test also that was added as part of 1.4. You've got improved performance parameters. There's about 4 tests right now that are new in this area. And that's different things for unaligned writes, write uncorrectables, write zeros, and data set management. And then the last is a directive to send, enable, and directives. And those are kind of the 5 major areas, but as you can see, that only probably what I talked about with those 5 bullets, even though those have the majority of the new tests, there are a lot of new tests throughout the actual test plan dealing in all the different groups, 1 through 10, and you should be aware of them. You can obviously go see the test plans on our IOL website under the NVMe test group, and under test plans, under that particular link, you'll be able to see all of the new tests. And there's a nice, history in there, obviously, that goes over all the changes and what you should be looking for. Now, as I mentioned before, 30 of these tests went from FYI to mandatory. So again, make sure you go out, take a look at that test plan, because there's 30 tests out there that have become mandatory if you're an actual PCI device and looking to get onto the NVMe.org's integrators list. And in the fabric section, at least 16 of those tests went from FYI to mandatory. So again, you've got a number, total of 30 or 46 tests that went, from FYI to mandatory for both PCI and fabrics events, fabric devices and testing of those. So make sure you go out and take a look at the test plan. You can find it on our IOL website under the NVMe group, under test plans link, and you'll be able to see all the good things that are in there. In terms of interoperability, so that's all conformance, but in terms of interoperability, there were really only some administrative changes, some spelling things that were changed, nothing of substance to really be mentioned. But if you're talking about Interop, and I know this is kind of an eye chart, this is obviously the set of devices that we currently test with to do interoperability, and you need to be able to, on the PCI testing, pass all the tests that are in the Interop test plan that are mandatory against at least 5 of these platforms. So again, we put it in here just so you've got this for your own testing back home, so that you can test it in your own shops and make sure that they work correctly. Now, moving on to fabrics conformance. As we can see, really right now, we use only the INTERACT PC-Edition in order to perform fabrics testing, and that is both the fabrics tests that are in the base specification, and in this case, version 13, as well as the NVMe-oF specification. Now, these are both test plans that are used for OF, and they will, we have to run both of them against any products, target products for conformance, actually, in terms of fabrics, and all the mandatory tests obviously need to pass in order for that particular device, a target, to get onto the integrators list. Now, a target also has to go through interoperability testing, so there's more there that needs to be done. So a target needs to go through conformance as well as interop. Switches and hosts or initiators need to just go through interoperability in order to get on the integrators list. Now, looking at the conformance test plan, there have only been 16 changes going from test plan 12 to test plan 13. And if we look at those, you can see that there are 11 new tests, and these are primarily dealing with NVMe over TCP binding tests. They are dealing with kind of walking yourself up the stack of TCP, dealing with, first some of the TCP basic connectivity issues, then moving on to the NVMe messaging, IC recs and things like this that will actually go in and actually establish a TCP connection. And then it will go into more of managing NVMe-oF with controller bindings and queue sizings and things like this. But there are, and these are all FYI. Oh, that's something I probably should have said under conformance. All new tests are FYI, no matter if it's the base specification or the fabric specification. All new tests are FYI. As I said earlier, the FYI tests go through a number of iterations and test sequences in order for the ICC to determine if they're ready for prime time or to become mandatory in order for devices to get onto the integrators list. And again, it's a one way for us to easily have time and effort to get the test straight, get the Interact software straight, and of course for you, the customer, to get your products working in terms of working correctly with them also. Now, there were 5 tests in the OF conformance test plan that went FYI to mandatory, and I just listed them out there, and you can go look at those. And again, make sure you do look at those to make sure you've got them all, because these are important. And then interoperability, there were really no changes in terms of interop testing for OF for test plan 13. This picture you've probably seen before if you've been on one of our webinars. It's the basic setup that we use for NVMe-oF testing. And that's whether it is for fiber channel, TCP, iWarp, or even Rocky, or even InfiniBand if we were to do that. We still haven't done InfiniBand yet, but it would be nice if we did. And on the right-hand side, you can see the summary of tests. Again, if you go out and look at the OF test plan that's out on our website, you can see all the different tests that we have in each one of these 5 areas. And of course, if you take a look at the actual picture that we have here, you'll see that the host system is going through a simple fabric type environment, 2 switches to a target. And that's the basic test bed setup that we have for performing any of our conformance as well as interrupt tests. Now, for MI testing, we currently use the T34 from Teledyne LaCroix, and we have, it's based off of the actual MI specification version 13, which again is based off of the MI 1.0A specification, I believe. And of course, this would be used to testing out SSDs. That's kind of the basic topology. There were 5 changes going between test plan 12 and test plan 13. And there was nothing of huge changes here. There were no mandatory or FYI to mandatory changes. There was a typo and a couple others that just had the incorrect messaging there, and some better description of the values and things like that in the data structures. So what we've done so far then is we've gone over the test plan 13. We went over the base specification, the OF conformance specification, interop, and also we've gone over the MI test plans also. So with that, I would send it back to Kerry for other announcements. Oh, I guess actually before I send it back to you, Kerry, I would say, make sure everybody's aware that this Plugfest is virtual. It will probably take longer. We have limited staff in-house. We're hoping to get more in next month. But again, our students, as Kerry mentioned earlier, will be remote. We will have them doing the testing remotely, which is something we've been doing for the last 2 months that we've been remote. So it is definitely something that we've done already and can do. And we're hoping to get, a lot of your products in for this Plugfest. So over to you, Kerry.
Thanks, Tim. All right, so on to other announcements. The ICC Interop and Compliance Committee is run every other Tuesday from 2 p.m. Eastern Time till 3 p.m. And this meeting is good to get involved if you want to know about the announcements, changes to test plans in real time. If you have any feedback, your feedback will be extremely helpful. But the information is right on the nvme.org website. Just go to the ICC and sign up to be added to either the mailing list or to receive information on the calls. Here's a summary of a lot of the information we talked about earlier for the virtual Plugfest. Like I said before, ship everything that the IOL will need to test your product. Include a list so that we can make sure it all comes back to you. The event may last longer than a week. If testing is running longer, we will communicate this to you. Remote troubleshooting will be coordinated during that week. We can either set up remote access, or depending on the level of troubleshooting, we can help you set up a test reservation. We will have to limit the firmware updates due to reduced resources, and the only reason is if we have to do a firmware update on a Thursday afternoon, we might not be able to complete the testing in time. But it will be on a need by need basis. So if this comes up, we will discuss it. Please test your product before shipping it to us. Download the test tools, run them. run interop testing, anything you could do to have confidence that once your product arrives, that it should be smooth sailing. Non-passing products, like I said, we'll be able to schedule a test reservation, and this will just be a regular reservation later on in the summer where we'll test your products in-house. We may have extra time at that time to do troubleshooting and debugging with you. If you need us to ship the device back and then you reship it to us, that's fine. We'll work out those logistics with you if needed. And then again, this is integrators list testing only. We're not going to have any time slots with the test and measurement companies this time. In the past, they've been great on supporting our test events, and we usually schedule a couple-hour time slots in for duck companies to sit down with them, and they'll run their test tools with your products to kind of show you a deeper dive into what's going on with your product. Qualifying products will be added to the integrators list by Friday, June 26th, once all the Plugfest products have been tested and reports are finalized. This is 2 weeks after the Fabrics Plugfest and the week after the PCIe Plugfest. We will be testing the SSD products the week after the Fabric, so we will need the following week to make sure that the reports are finalized and provided first before the integrators list is updated. But if you have any questions, reach out to me and I will be able to provide you with an update on where we stand with that. I just want to give a thank you to our partners that have supported past Plugfest events. Obviously, they will not be able to join us at this event. Hopefully, I'll be back in November for Plugfest 14. If you have any questions about analyzers, adapters, I can put you in touch with a representative from any of these companies. They're extremely helpful, so please take advantage. All right, so again, please be prepared. Download the test tools and run them. The version 13.0 Conformance test tools are available right now, and run them, pre-qualify your product, make sure everything passes. If you don't have the test tools right now, these are the 3 links that you would need. The first one is the link to the licensing agreement. There are agreements for the different flavors of test tool, whether your device is PCIe based, Ethernet based, or fiber channel. A little bit of a timeline reminder. Everything needed for testing will need to be received 1 week before the start of your event. And again, that's just to make sure that we have everything we need so that testing can begin on Monday. We will not start the testing before Monday. And then the device schedule will be made after registration closes. The registration dates, which are posted in a couple more slides, are pretty close to the start of the event, but we just want to give folks enough time to register any products if they are interested in participating. And then again, reports will be provided by Friday, June 26th. And like I promised you, here are the dates for the registration. The Fabrics event closes the day after Memorial Day, May 26th. And then the PCIe event closes on June 1st. And there is a limit of 2 unique products that you can register to participate. If you have additional products, I can add those to a waiting list. And if there is room, I'll let you know if those can be added. And again, no attendees will be permitted to attend this event. And here's our contact information. Again, I'm Kerry Munson, and Tim Sheehan was speaking with you earlier. We hope you enjoyed this presentation, and we will go to questions right now.
Okay, looks like there's been a number of questions that have come in. Dave has been online, Dave Wolf, and he's been answering many of them as we go along. So please enter your questions in now. I'll just kind of step through a couple of them. Mark was asking about plans for initiators to control their systems remotely. Obviously, we can provide you some access to your initiators through our firewall and things like that. We've done that in the past. But it's definitely something that we can do. We'll also, as Kerry mentioned and we mentioned in the presentation, be able to do conference calls and Zoom conference calls in order to have that kind of back and forth between companies and ourselves. Let's see. Given the current time of the pandemic, what is the process for submitting? You can register your products, as Dave said, for the for this Plugfest, or you can send them to the lab at any point before or after the Plugfest. You could just go into the My IOL web portal, sorry, and please just enter in the information and what you need to be testing, and that would be great. Okay, we have a question about ZNS and plans to support ZNS. There is no ZNS testing that would happen during this event, particularly because we're virtual. And as Kerry said, we're not going to be able to do a large build, although that would have been a cool one to actually put into the large build at the end of the Fabrics Plugfest week. But like Dave said and I said, there's definitely, we've had at least 4 or 5 different people come at us in the last couple of weeks about ZNS and asking for support. At this point, NVMe.org is that is asked that we limit additions for the testing right now, but it is something I know that's on their roadmap, and they're looking at putting it into future test plans. And so I see this as something that we could definitely do in a Fabrics large build where it's just a playground. And then obviously the NVMe.org ICC will be putting it into a formal test plan for them in the near future. Larry's asking if we need to provide adapters for U2 products. Dave was correct. We do have them, but, would recommend that you send them. As Kerry had mentioned, any cabling, transceivers, if there's any kind of a breakout cable you need to actually connect up to a switch for Fabrics, make sure you have that. If there are management cables, I know we've had a couple of Plugfests where we've had to go for some unique management cables in order to actually download firmwares and things like that. Make sure all of those kind of cables and transceivers and things like that you will provide. And of course, as Kerry mentioned earlier, make sure you provide a list, because in previous Plugfests, it's been you, the customer, who unpacks and packs the boxes here at the lab. That way it takes our, takes the IOL and the IOL employees out of the equation. But this time around, we're going to be the ones that will be unpacking and packing, and we want to make sure that when we unpack, we've got everything that we can compare against the packing slip. And then, of course, when we pack it up, make sure you get everything back that's on that packing slip. We've got a question about testing Gen 4 devices at Gen 4 speeds. And today we'll be running the tests at Gen 3 speeds. But we would definitely encourage you to send your Gen 4 products. We've been testing them in the past. And actually, we just got word in the last day or so that Teledyne LaCroix is going to be sending us a Z4 system. So we're still waiting for that, but that's a great enhancement. Thank you, Teledyne, to our test capabilities. And that hopefully will be coming before the Plugfest, but we'll let you know if it does. All right, Carl's asking about power cycling equipment or servers and things like that. And Dave's correct in his answer in that we have been doing remotely power cycle of equipment here in the lab using power controlled strips that are able to do it obviously, control wise through management interfaces. And that's one of the reasons why we've been able to continue our conformance and interop testing here at the lab, is that the testing that we've been getting in, seeing this happening, we actually sent our student employees to work from home the week before we all got shut down, just to make sure we didn't have any, hiccups in our remote testing apparatus. And it seemed to work okay. Obviously, we've had some, cutting of teeth during that time, but for the most part, it's worked out well. And that's definitely something we could do at this event. We'll have to see how many we can set up and how will that be, for the Plugfest. Let's see. So Marta was asking about setup and assembly and how will that testing be done. There will be staff like myself. I'm in the lab right now today. I'm one of the hands, eyes, ears, I guess, of people who are external and remote. We're hoping to have more people in the lab. It'll probably only be staff for, the Plugfest, but Dave, Kerry, myself will be here. So we'll be there to, set things up and hook things up and, communicate and deal with any issues that we find, in that early setup stage, as well as debugging along the way. Yep, so Barry's asking about 100 gig switch connectivity. We definitely have 100 gig switches that we're going to be, Mellanox 100 gig switches that we're going to be connecting up to. There could be other speeds that we, based off of the products that we connect up to it, that we'll be running the testing through. The NVMe test plans don't specify actual speeds. It's not performance testing. So sure. And let's see, for PCI, Pradeep was asking about PCI devices. We must pass in both test suites, PCI and LaCroix. And the answer to that, Pradeep, is yes. If it's a mandatory test, then you need to pass it in order to get on the integrators list. If for some reason there's some issue with the test scripts or something like that, if we can't fix them then during the Plugfest week, then yes, you would get a waiver for that test until a time when, and you'd be able to get on the list until a time, in the obviously near future where we would have that fixed, and then you could come in and test again for your knowledge. Okay. And then, yes, we're going to be using, obviously we'll be using, participant products for initiators targets where we can, because that would expedite the testing. If we could end up testing two products, say the interoperability pieces of it at the same time. But if not, we're going to be using the products that we have here in the lab and that we've had in the lab for at least, a year or so, or half a year. And those products will be used in order to perform a lot of the testing. Okay. And I think that's all. Are there any other questions offhand? Obviously, if any further questions do come in, we'll get them up there. And, when Mara posts this particular presentation, we can make sure that they're answered for you. And I think that's the end of the Q&A. So I would thank you all for coming and listening to our Plugfest 13 virtual webinar presentation. This will be a first time we're trying this, so obviously bear with us, but I'm sure we're all having to deal with those issues these days. Since we've already been doing the remote testing, I think it should go pretty well. But as we know, Mondays at a Plugfest are always very unique. There's always something going on that somebody didn't think of, and that's okay. That's the whole idea of it. So I look forward to seeing you at the event the second week of June.